Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Renegade Operative, and I'd like to prestigiously welcome you into the blood-soaked confines of the USG Ishimura. This will be a detailed analysis involving creature lore behind Dead Space 1. The basic structure within this video will be broken down into a few parts, like appearance, lore, and how these rampaging abominations came to be in the first place. Keep in mind that this video will pertain to evolutions within Dead Space 1 only, which means that if there is a monster variation that begins a process of evolution during the sequels, then I will not be covering them until later in the timeline. And to be frank, enhanced necromorphs you see later in the series are all just blackened variants with minuscule changes anyway. Changes that usually pertain to more armored skin or stronger attacks. They might be a small footnote regardless when I go over sub-breeds down the line compared to the newer creatures. For now, let's dive right into the main event to describe a common enemy that you'll see sulking around dark corners immensely. The most common necromorph is referred to as the slasher. The word necro itself has a relationship with death and morph based on the bodily design that changes at a rapid pace. We can see that the arms are twisted upwards in a gruesome fashion, which accommodates the new bone structure. It seems like the razor sharp talons have exploded from both palms, which is the main method for assault here. Slashers will use these talons to rip, tear, and bisect any potential victims into sporadic human chunks. There's also red veins that are sprawled within the body that shows an increased elevation of blood pressure and ruthless aggression. The abdomen seems to have these small stringy hands that slashers can use to hold the victim in place. The vestigial limbs can be controlled by machinations from the marker. However, drawbacks will apply to this creature due to their particular origin. The human body is still weak when it comes to severe damage, so any mining tool can sever a slasher or render them briefly immobile. I say briefly because if the body isn't fully delimbed, then a slasher could use their abnormal appendages to crawl to Issac until the threat is neutralized. The female variant is the only version that could amass toxic properties to potentially spit them in Issac's direction. The lurker once again shows that the infection has no sympathy even when infants are brought into the equation. Lurkers can be born in two ways. As radiographs have shown, they could be conceived either normally or created through an artificial womb. Biological implants were cited as the initial source for rampant mutation among the organ banks. This causes long tendrils to crawl, slither, and erupt from the baby's back at will. Dogs also appear to be exposed to this infection as well, given the discoveries found in sovereign areas like Tau Volantis. Once self-awareness is achieved, the biomass can unfurl into an effusive position. The bacterium buildup is then exported through pink tentacle barbs, which can cause significant damage. The lurker had a slight growth spurt, yet it is able to walk in a bipedal position due to changes in the biomass. The barbs are strong enough to decapitate an adult human with enough force applied to the trachea. This means that caution should be fully exercised when dealing with these little bastards. Originally, the Infector was going to be an emaciated humanoid that was quite the spectacle in concept art. What we got was a dash of a stingray on the side. This fleshy menace has only one distinctive job: to spread the necromorph bacteria by any means necessary. This relates to the yellow viscus that is injected into the head of a dead body, allowing them to reanimate. The viral behavior once again synthesized itself from a genetic code that was discovered by Michael Altman. If anyone who is alive is gashed by an infector, then familiar delirium will occur for the victim before possibly turning right into a necromorph. Infectors have tiny claw-like appendages to move around, and their body is almost like a fleshy straitjacket. They are small, but the main issue is the proboscis, which is like spinal tissue that can be used to stab or inject bacteria. Humans could also turn into infectors via studies on recombination. It's all nasty shit as the body goes through a personal tornado by stretching inward, expanding outwards, and the organs start to follow suit in the same vein. Ugh. The pregnants embody what they are to a capital T, large hulking necromorphs that have a bulbous belly when approaching the player. There are even stranger things to talk about when regarding the sexual orientation between pregnants. The male and the females can carry these abdominal sacs to release their spawn, known as swarmers. Swarmers are miniature pieces of cartilage and flesh that have mouths similar to infectors. These tiny mouths give them the ability to feast on Issac as a concentrated attack. It's very ill-advised to shoot a pregnant in the stomach to prevent a swarm from going after you. The legs are filed down to a disgusting degree in order to allow the pregnant to walk around on its immense weight. We can say that these arms are akin to a slasher, and the drooping tentacle maw seems to exist on the pregnant's face as well. Some of the same rules still apply to some well-timed shots on the arms, the head, or the legs. This will signify that a weaker resistance to mining tools is definitely in effect here. This is where things start to get a little more intense when speaking about the anatomy for the brute. The brute is a gigantic behemoth that is almost similar to a monkey in terms of posture. It has calcified skin and bone marrow that runs through the ligaments and frontal areas. An exposed orifice within the stomach carries the same infectious bacteria that exists in all necromorphs. The difference is that this bacterium is highly corrosive, which can cause a massive explosion once detached and thrown at the victim. The monster does have a noticeable flaw despite the hard armoring, and that's the exposed flesh on the creature's back. It is susceptible to a high damage rate, which will cause the brute to clamber back into itself like a turtle shell at any signifier induced by pure pain. The first brute was genetically created by Earth's government through a very specific code ripped straight from the marker. Dead bodies were sprawled and harvested to create this massive behemoth called Krax that was heavily utilized in an assassination attempt against Michael Altman, the man who made initial contact with the first black marker. The Leaper is a fascinating subject since it's all about speed, immense power, aggression, and ripping into a victim like a bloody outback steak. This is a mobile, reanimated corpse that has a protruding spinal column to increase its agility. The bone is serrated, jagged, and fused outwardly that adds in a semblance of durability for the exoskeleton. A blade-like talon that has erupted from the spinal column, along with such dedicated viscera, such as dripping intestines on sight. The tail blade is similar in fashion to a scorpion, except this creature prefers the bisection variety over simple poisoning. The jaws on this beast looks almost akin to a saber-toothed tiger, which is a very unique mutation to the Leaper. The hands have been morphed into extremely long claws, and the Leapers have been shown to travel at fast speed even at 0G. The exploders are akin to kamikaze bombers once they are near Issac. One swoop of their bacterium-ridden arm usually ends up in a massive detonation. However, the face is split from a vertical position, allowing a split maw to formulate down the middle. The arm is filled with pustule corrosive that leads to heavy weight for this abomination. This means that the arm serves as a target for mining tools or gunfire to dislodge things for an imminent explosion. They are not really fast due to their original leg turning into one singular limb that is deformed, veiny, and conjoined at the foot. The idea behind exploders is to use strength in numbers, with multiple bombs going off in one area. If they are underestimated, then they could use close quarters combat to end Issac's life at the drop of a dime. The divider is quite the anomaly to explain here. Well, for starters, it's just the appearance alone that is quick enough to send chills down your spine. It looks like a heavily flayed and lanky man from the first appearance. These are decomposed bodies from ranked senior officials within the USG Ishimura. The arms have buckled down to immense elongation, slumping themselves right to the ground floor. Most of the organs are just thus a distant memory when you see the drained orifice that flutters from a divider's chest. There is a compromise of 5 parts that is crafted from a divider: the head, the tongue, the arms, and the legs. This creature has the ability to segment parts to attack Issac, really making you think twice about the theory for cutting off their limbs. All of this was basically caused by a mental pinch that used nerve and muscle assimilation to do permanent damage as a lethal weapon. The main purpose revolving around these limbs is to overwhelm potential intruders before they have a chance to retaliate. The tongue could rip off a human head with ease, or the component head could take a page from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There's a brutal death involving this where the component skull will decapitate Issac and the tentacles will be forced deep down into the severed trachea, wrapping around the full column provided by the spine. These tentacles pulse through the spine via electrodes, which causes the joints to feel this sensation as the nerves are assimilated. Once the alien head takes control, it will fix his hanging skull right back into an upright position. The divider is probably one of the more unique enemies within Dead Space 1, which is a crying shame because you really don't see that monster that much. It's also very distinct in sound, since you'll hear a painful wail before you encounter it. The Weezer is a very disadvantaged necromorph because, well, for starters, it can't move. Both of the legs are combined at the thighs, so walking is a bit out of the question. 2 giant lungs pulse through the back of the Weezer as toxic gas fills up a room. If a Weezer is coughing, then it is said in the Dead Space novel that Weezers could potentially grow larger lungs outside of a contained biosphere. That means that anything outside of the USG Ishimura could be terraformed or poisoned to a much larger scale if Weezers remained alive. Not much to write home about once you kill them, but if the poison could hurt Issac, it's best to remain at a distance and shoot them until it's all over. The Twitcher is like a very special mutated slasher in every particular sense of the word. The difference is very obvious once their physical state is taken under advisement. We're talking about a slasher that was molded from some kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger factory. It seems pretty ballsy to do a workout routine within the USG Ishimura, right?
Because I'm a stud. I'm ballsy. I don't take no shit from anyone. I smoke my stogie anywhere I want. I don't have to find a hideout place like you.
Jokes aside, these enemies hold a much larger muscle mass and a more illustrated face remains prevalent. There's a reason for this abnormal growth that was caused by leaked stasis within a soldier's rig. The stasis then mixed together upon recombinant reanimation to enhance the Twitcher DNA by a quarter mile. The equipment that was being carried at the time could also melt through the skin depending on what was being hauled in. This could lead to even more bodily defects. For example, a gas mask could be split right through the jaw during the recombination process. Living up to their namesake, the Twitcher, we see that they gained this ability through stasis and DNA enhancements. This gives the Twitcher some inhuman speed. Even if the legs are completely severed, they remain as one of the fastest creatures in the first Dead Space game. The Hunter is a big bad to the bone sub-boss that you'll encounter later in Dead Space 1. The same song and dance will apply when talking about how it's just akin to a roided up slasher. The difference is how they were created exactly through corrupted tissue being inserted in the central nervous system. The corruption is a special necromorph membrane that can highly accelerate their metabolism. Once injected into the necromorph, it will grow larger, being able to obtain new attributes such as the ability to regenerate highly damaged ligaments. Only extreme heat caused by turbines from the USG Ishimura was able to put the Hunter to rest. The only valuable note is to run or use stasis if you don't have any other option left. Not much to go on about the physicality of this thing except noticing the strengthened muscle tissue and bone fragments that can be used to cut into unsuspecting victims. The Guardian is a tethered, flesh-ridden nightmare that is usually stuck to walls. Once again, this is a visual demonstration that shows how corruption infects human remains and the environment. The body is fused with rampant symbiosis that can evolve over time. Prematurely, we see Guardians sprawl on the wall with their guts hanging out, which shows the underdeveloped Guardians aren't really that versatile. It looks like a very infected torso with a blood red crimson coating the entire skeletal structure via the face. A well-developed Guardian is almost like a different story because some human elements do remain. The problem is the bulbous flesh starts to grow, which causes painful yelling among every adult variation. If Issac ventures too close, then a tentacle-like appendage can burst from the Guardian's chest, which rips Issac's head off completely. Guardians mostly live up to their namesake despite being immobile. They are usually protecting key items or secret pathways until they are finally defeated. The Leviathan can be summarized as an unstructured mass that was found floating in deep space. It collided with the hydroponics deck, slithering its way to the food court as a means to find protection. The corrupted mass is home to what seems like many mouths wrapped in gruesome layers. This creature uses the aforementioned trait to form circular bacteria that will severely harm any human being in the area. It is pivotal for Issac and the crew to get rid of this entity since all the oxygen is draining away at the very second that the Leviathan hit the ship. More than likely the poison is in the air, and that's what causes these issues to occur. There's also 3 drag tentacles that harbor around the ship before Issac fights the main Leviathan. Fun fact, Glenn Schofield, the Dead Space 1 director, claimed that these were the hardest set pieces to fully animate among the team, which took weeks upon weeks to complete. If a drag tentacle successfully reels Issac near a hole, then he will be killed in 3 distinctive death scenes. The Slug is also another big form of biomass that inhabits the ship's exterior this time, rather than the interior. The Slug looks like what you would expect by this point by most boss battles. It's a giant circular flesh-ridden monstrosity with multiple tentacles that can be used as an attack. It's a lot bigger than humanly predicted, which leads to the carcass covering an entire hole on the USG Ishimura. Issac then mans an ADS cannon to combat the beast. Issac's mission was to remove the Slug in order to contact an adjacent ship called the USM Valor. They were going to be told not to open an escape pod containing a slasher, but the mission was deemed a failure when the Valor crashes into the Ishimura anyway. There's not much else to write home about with this boss. You just shoot the wrangling blob until it dies. Now we move on to the final gelatinous mass, which tends to be the final boss for the entire game. The hive mind is naturally the source for all the corruption pits that you see slather across the environment. This monster is the result of leftover testing from a group called the Sovereign Colonies. They functioned as a hardened militarized group until a new faction finally took over. They mostly regulated themselves on a foreign planet called Aegis 7, which gave birth to this specimen once the planet was fully excavated. Colony armed forces aborted all testing with the Aegis 7 marker, and that gave way for the hive mind bacteria to escape within a broken crater. It was said that the hive mind nestled in this very same crater for almost 2 centuries as influence grew more and more. Once the planet was cracked years later, this finally exposed the hive mind to the surface, and once its full power was unleashed, then all hell broke loose. The colony was overrun in a matter of seconds, filling Aegis 7 with blood, gore, and dismemberment as necromorphs scatter across the area. The hive mind reveals itself during the final stretch as a humongous worm-like creature that is a mixture between the previous Slug boss and the Leviathan all rolled into one. It is reawoken due to circumstances that surrounded Kendra Daniels trying to steal the Aegis 7 marker. The hive mind also has a dreadful blossom of arms that wave around once he's activated. The rib rib cage more or less protects some of the yellow organs from time to time in order to avoid damage. There's also a massive blister involving 5 eyes that the creature uses to watch its prey like a hawk. The most noticeable thing with this boss is the giant rows of teeth that is all the better to consume Issac with. If the player fails to shoot the spots in time, then they will be treated to one of the most gruesome deaths in survival horror history. And that is it for my Dead Space video, the Dead Space 1 lore. Comment below and let me know what you thought about the creature lore in this video and what's your favorite monster, and tell me all that good stuff in the comment section below, like what's your favorite look, appearance, how fucked up the creature has to be, etc. You know, all that good stuff. If you like this video, be sure to share and subscribe and like the video. Helps me out a lot with the engagement. And once again, I will see you guys soon. I'm not gonna keep the outros really long. You can find all my links in the description if you want to follow me on social media. Yeah, this is me rambling now. I'm gonna sign off. I will see you guys next time. This was fun, and take care. Later.